The Doklam dispute is back in the news. No, there is no standoff yet, but what's happening now is perhaps even more serious, also detrimental to Indian interests. Bhutan appears to have shifted position. Its prime minister has made a statement and he said that China is party to the Doklam dispute, that China has a say on the fate of Doklam. And that's problematic. We'll discuss why. First, the facts. Doklam is part of Bhutan. It made headlines in 2017. Indian and Chinese troops were locked in a tense standoff. There's a territorial dispute over Doklam. The dispute is between China and Bhutan. So where does India come in? India's role is complicated. It doesn't claim Doklam, but it supports Bhutan's claim. In 2017, the dispute flared up. That's because the Chinese army tried to build a road through Doklam, and India intervened. For 73 days, Indian and Chinese troops were at loggerheads. Eventually, China blinked. India managed to push back the Chinese and to secure Bhutan's claim. But now the same Bhutan is giving legitimacy to China, it seems. And the Prime Minister's statement could fundamentally change the dispute. Listen to what Prime Minister Lote Tshering said in an interview, and I'm quoting, "It is not up to Bhutan alone to solve the problem. There are three of us. There is no big or small country. There are three equal countries, each counting for a third." This statement has kicked up a storm. There are three of us, he says. There are three equal countries. He means Bhutan, China, and India. So he's giving China an equal say. And here's why that's problematic. Look at this map. This is Doklam. The Chinese call it Donglang. It is high up in the Himalayas in the northeast, a small area, less than 100 square kilometers, but strategically quite significant. Look at the location. Doklam is close to Tibet's Chumbi Valley, Bhutan's Ha Valley, and India's Sikkim. For centuries, Bhutan's herdsmen have used Doklam. It used to be a quiet grazing area. No one really bothered them until 1962. That's when China attacked. It launched a war against India. 1962 is when China's interests in Doklam began to change. Beijing said Doklam was a part of China, not a part of Bhutan, and Chinese troops started entering Bhutanese lands. In recent years, they've been more aggressive. The Chinese have ramped up their border infrastructure. The PLA has increased its presence in the Chumbi Valley. And all of it led to the standoff in 2017. In fact, let's go back to that map. In 2017, China showed up in this area with equipment. It wanted to build roads leading up to a critical zone, the Bhutanese army camp. It is near the Jampheri Ridge. Bhutan felt the heat, it dialed India, and India responded. 2 days after the Chinese troops showed up, India sent a few hundred troops. They entered Doklam, they stopped the construction. And that led to a standoff. It lasted for more than 2 months, but was finally settled peacefully. You could say the Chinese made a tactical retreat. But they've not given up on Doklam. They still want control for two reasons. Number one, it gives PLA strategic access. And number two, China has its eyes on a key ridge, a ridge that overlooks the Siliguri corridor. The area is also known as Chicken's Neck. It's a narrow stretch of land, but it's extremely important for India because this piece of land connects India to its northeastern states. And that is why China wants it. If China controls Doklam, Chinese forces will be positioned on higher ground, on a vantage point. They will be able to gather intelligence on India's military deployments. And in the event of a conflict, they could potentially threaten Indian supply routes. So Doklam is worth fighting for. And China's actions in 2017 were widely condemned. Here's what Bhutan said then in 2017. "The construction of the road inside Bhutanese territory is a direct violation of the agreements and affects the process of demarcating the boundary between our two countries." India too issued a warning to China, again from 2017. "Such construction would represent a significant change of status quo with serious security implications for India." Post-Doklam, we saw a thaw. Months after the standoff, India and China tried to re-engage. In 2018, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi traveled to Wuhan to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. This was an informal summit. 1 year later, Xi Jinping traveled to India, to Mamallapuram in the southern state of Tamil Nadu. He met Modi again in an informal summit. The optics and optimism were hard to miss, but with China, these things tend to be short-lived. In 2020, Chinese troops returned to the border. They attacked Indian soldiers in eastern Ladakh. And that standoff is still not over. Both India and China have now deployed thousands of troops along the border. In Doklam, China has been working quietly behind the scenes. Earlier this year, a Bhutanese delegation visited China. They were there to discuss border disputes. And soon, Bhutan will have some visitors too. A Chinese technical team is scheduled to arrive. Bhutan's Prime Minister spoke about this too. And I have that quote. We do not encounter major border problems with China, but certain territories are not yet demarcated. We still have to discuss it and draw a line. So is this a reversal? Is this a shift in posture? Is Bhutan now denying the Chinese intrusions? And more importantly, where does this leave India? Bhutan's Prime Minister had a message for India too. Listen to what he said. India and China have problems all along their border. We are waiting to see how they resolve their differences. And what is New Delhi's response? India's External Affairs Minister spoke today at Network 18's Rising India event. He said engaging with China on border issues is still work in progress.
I met my counterpart in September 2020. He accepted that this was a dangerous situation. And since then, we've been trying to pull back the close-up deployments, not close-up deployments, the close-up forward deployments. But it can only be done if there is a mutual agreement. Now, this is still unfinished work. There are places where we have this forward deployments. We continue to work away at it.
The stakes are high. This is not just about countering China's expansionism. India's position as a net security provider for the region is also being put to the test. Will the shift by Bhutan shut India out of the discussions on Doklam? We'll be tracking this for you. Back in China, officials are once again shaking their fists in fury, and once again it's about Taiwan. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-Wen is traveling to Latin America. She's going to Guatemala and Belize. These are Taiwan's remaining allies in the region. And her journey will take her through the US. She'll land in New York before heading to Central America, and on her way back, she's expected to stop in Los Angeles. This will be next week. And this stopover is what China is most upset about, because an important meeting could take place in the US. President Tsai is expected to meet Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the US House of Representatives. The meeting is not confirmed, but Beijing is taking no chances. It has threatened retaliation.
Should the leader of Taiwan engage with the Congress Speaker during her visit in the US, it will be another provocation that seriously violates the One China principle, damages China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and undermines peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. We firmly oppose this and will take resolute countermeasures to fight back.
Let me give you some context. China follows what it calls the One China principle. It believes that Taiwan is a province of China and not an independent nation. Since the year 1949, Taiwan has been self-governed. But now China wants to reunify it. It says it will do so forcefully if it comes to that. And to counter this threat, Taiwan relies on allies, both official and unofficial. Officially, there are only 13 countries in the world that recognize Taiwan, 13 countries. India is not one of them, neither is the US. But unofficially, more and more countries now support Taiwan. And they face pushback and threats from China. Over the last few years, the number of official allies of Taiwan has dwindled. That's because China is using its checkbook aggressively. It is pumping money into countries and getting them to dump Taiwan. The latest case is Honduras. We told you about this last week. Honduras used to recognize Taiwan, but now it has turned to China. They established formal relations last Sunday. A joint communique was signed. And China's Foreign Minister, Qin Gang, did not miss the opportunity to needle Taiwan.
This once again fully proves that adhering to the One China principle is a correct choice in the line with international justice and the trend of the times, and it is winning people's hearts and is a trend of the general development. We inform sternly the Taiwan authorities that engaging in separatist activities for Taiwan independence is against the will and interests of the Chinese nation and against the trend of history and is doomed to a dead end.
Let's pause for a second and look at the timing of this development. President Tsai's trip to Latin America was announced well in advance. Honduras has been talking to China for a while now. And curiously, this is the time they chose to switch allegiances, right before the Taiwanese president's trip. Foreign Minister Joseph Wu said China is doing all of this intentionally.
The Chinese always try to manipulate the event to distort our diplomatic relations. And since the president's visit to our diplomatic allies, Belize and Guatemala, and it's being public, and therefore the way the Chinese has been doing this seems to be correlated. And we also got the information a lot earlier that the discussions in between Honduras and China doesn't seem to be coming to an end stage. And therefore, it's, our suspicion and your suspicion are the same, that China seems to be doing this intentionally.
So Beijing is prying away Taiwan's official allies, but Taiwan is adding to the list of its unofficial ones. The Czech Republic have a delegation in Taiwan as we speak. So do the Tibetans. Germany sent a lawmaker to Taiwan recently, much to China's annoyance. And of course, there's the US. Until 1979, the US recognized Taiwan officially, but then it switched to Beijing. America now follows a policy of strategic ambiguity. That's what they call it, strategic ambiguity. It officially recognizes China, but also openly deals with Taiwan. So the Americans can have their cake and eat it too. That is strategic ambiguity. But there are some things which are not ambiguous. For instance, America is required by law to protect Taiwan from an invasion. It is the biggest defense supplier to Taiwan. And this American backing is crucial for Taiwan's survival, which is why Taipei keeps engaging with Washington. And that brings us back to President Tsai's trip. She came to power in 2016, and since then, this will be her 7th visit to the US. Also her first since the year 2019. And every time she goes, her delegation meets American officials. So this is not anything new. And that's the line that the US and Taiwan are taking. They're calling it routine. They're asking China to not overreact, to not throw a tantrum like they did last year. That's when former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. China was furious. It launched military drills. It continuously violated Taiwan's airspace, raising the threat of war. This time, both Taiwan and the US want to avoid a repeat, but China does not seem to care if the meeting is routine.
过去的错误不能为今天的错误开脱。
The transit to the US is a fake reason conjured up by the Taiwan leader. The true reason is to seek breakthroughs and promote her Taiwan independence agenda. It is not China that is overreacting, but the US side that's blindly conniving with and supporting Taiwan's independence forces.
China is firmly opposing President Tsai's trip. It has lodged multiple complaints with the US. It has also promised to retaliate. Taiwan's president knew all of this before boarding her flight, and this is the statement she issued.
External pressure will not hinder our determination to go global. We are calm and confident. We will not succumb and we will not provoke. Taiwan will walk on the road of freedom and democracy determinedly and walk to the world.
Bold words, but will it be enough to fight off an angry dragon? We'll keep you posted. Meanwhile, China continues to crack down on tech giants at home. Xi Jinping is ripping apart Jack Ma's empire. First, it was the Ant Group. Now, it is Alibaba's turn. The e-commerce giant is being split into 6 different pieces. Each unit will be a different company. So Alibaba will break up into 6 companies, each with its own chief executive and board of directors. Listen to what Alibaba's current CEO Daniel Zhang said about this, and I'm quoting, "The market is the best litmus test, and each business group and company can pursue independent fundraising and IPOs when they are ready." That's how the CEO explains the shift. It's the biggest restructuring of Alibaba in its 24-year history. Stock markets have cheered the move. Alibaba shares shot up. In the US, they were up by 14%. In Hong Kong, they gained 13%. But these gains are meaningless if you look at the larger picture. Since the year 2020, Alibaba shares have fallen almost 70%, 70% fall. What caused this massive drop? China's sweeping crackdown. It targeted the tech sector. It wiped off billions from Alibaba's value. Regulators even fined Alibaba. They claim the company abused its market position for years. It was asked to cough up $2.8 billion. The split can be called the final solution, but the decision to split was not a business decision, it was a political decision. This restructuring is about power and control. You see, Alibaba became too big. Experts have even called it the grandfather of China's tech industry. As of 2021, Alibaba had more than 800 million users in China alone. In October 2020, it was worth $850 billion. It was a very powerful company. And this power made the Chinese Communist Party uncomfortable, especially President Xi Jinping, which is a bit strange considering Jack Ma is a member of the Communist Party himself, the Communist Party of China. But he shined too much for his own good. He was China's most celebrated entrepreneur, and this became his undoing. Xi Jinping saw him as a threat to his power. In December 2020, the Chinese president chaired 2 meetings with top officials of the Communist Party, and there were 2 key takeaways. First, there was a call for stronger antitrust efforts. And second, Xi Jinping stressed on the need for national security, political security, and the security of state power and political system. Join the dots, and this is what it looks like. Stronger antitrust efforts and the stress on protecting state power. The message was quite clear. Big businesses should not become monopolies. Enterprises should not become too big for the Communist Party to control. Then in 2021, Xi Jinping launched a more direct attack. He did not name Alibaba, but there was no doubt that Alibaba was the target. The Chinese president wanted anti-monopoly regulations to be implemented. Let me quote from what he said. The implementation of anti-monopoly regulations and policies promoting fair competition is an intrinsic requirement for improving the socialist market economic system. Behind the scenes, the crackdown had already begun. Regulators fined Alibaba. They called 34 major tech companies soon after. 34 companies. They were given 1 month to introspect and to begin following new regulations. Basically, this was a warning to all tech giants in China. They were being told that they could meet the same fate as Alibaba. Now, the e-commerce giant will be broken up. Do you know what's the market value of Alibaba today? Around $250 billion. 3 years back, it was $850 billion. So Alibaba has reduced or has been reduced to almost 1/4 of its value. And China's crackdown is complete. And that is why Jack Ma has resurfaced. He was seen in China this week after spending more than a year abroad. Xi Jinping has cut him to size and broken up his company. India wants to become a global manufacturing hub. That's the dream, and it's going to be a long journey. But here's a milestone. Apple is turning to India to manufacture its products. And this is happening at a time when Apple wants to reduce its dependence on China. Some numbers have come out. Made in India Apple shipments have gone up by 162%. Can India indeed become the next electronics hub? Here's a report.
Apple is the biggest smartphone company in the world today. Last year, it sold 1.2 billion smartphones. Now this electronics behemoth is turning to India and making devices here. It's all happening under the Make in India banner. Last year, the volume of iPhone shipments manufactured in India grew by 65%. Here's an even better number. The value of iPhone shipments made in India grew by 162% compared to 2021. Apple now captures 25% of the total value of India's smartphone market. Apple's exports from India doubled last year, surpassing the $2.5 billion mark. Foxconn, Pegatron, and Wistron are Apple's manufacturing partners in India. In the last quarter of 2022, Foxconn and Wistron were the fastest growing manufacturers in India's electronics sector. Apple's export from India doubled last year, surpassing the $2.5 billion mark. And do you know how long Apple has been assembling iPhones in India? Just about a year. So the results are quite phenomenal. By 2025, Apple wants to make 1 of every 4 iPhones in India. India is a bright spot in the global economy and Apple knows it, which is why it is expanding its base in the country. iPhones will soon be assembled at a site in the southern state of Karnataka. At least 300 acres of land has been set aside for this facility. And Foxconn will invest about $700 million in it. The factory is expected to generate over 100,000 jobs over the next 10 years. But Apple wants more from India. The company is asking for changes in India's labor laws before it expands production. Now, not only is it a laborious task, but also a fairly controversial one. But that doesn't mean that India is willing to let go of the opportunity. Several state governments have agreed to tweak the labor rules. Reports say, apart from Karnataka, the willing participants include states like Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, and Gujarat. Another critical factor in Apple's newfound love for India is its plans to reduce reliance on, you guessed it, China. The question is why? Growing tensions between Washington and Beijing is one big factor. Apple does not want to be caught in the crossfire. COVID-19 pandemic was also a big wake-up call for the tech giant. China's harsh lockdowns led to disruptions in Apple's supply chain. Last year, its iPhone production target fell short by nearly 6 million units. And then there's the added incentive for Apple to turn to India. The Narendra Modi government has rolled out a $6.6 billion incentive program to woo smartphone manufacturers. The deal is too good to ignore. So what does it mean for you? Your next iPhone could come with a Made in India tag.